the American truck from the army came, I was screaming my head off. And they would give me chocolates, they would give me chewing gum. I was 3.5 years older, or maybe 4, I was a little older. I couldn't eat anything. They were so funny.
So today we have Vera with us. She's going to be sharing a little bit of her life and experiences. So Vera, if you would be so kind, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I was born many years ago. And I had probably a very beautiful life where I was born. I was born in Poland, which is now Poland. It was actually Germany at that time. And we had a beautiful house. And I was actually born in the house, at home. And then my brother was born in 1943, also at home. And 1945, we had to leave our home. My father was in a war, and all the women and children had to get out of that part of Germany, which became Poland. And my aunt and my cousin, they came with us. And all I remember is that I was sitting in the back of my mother in the train and playing with my cousin. That's all I can remember. And then we went to Bavaria, and my mother found all the farmers and people had to take us in. They had to make room for us. So we came to a farm, and they gave us a room, and the room wasn't very nice. There was still all kinds of equipment from the farm in there, and there were mice in there, and my mother was a little upset, but I probably liked it. I don't remember. I was never really unhappy. And as children, we had a great life. We were always playing outside, and one time my brother brought home a cat, and my mother says, "We cannot have a cat. There are many cats on the farm. We will not have a cat." So my brother took the cat and took it outside the village. The village had like 7 houses. So he took the cat outside, and the cat came back because naturally he was fed by us before we let him go. And he came back, and then it was my cat. And ever since that time, I always had a cat. I still have a cat. The kids, the boys, they all played in the woods, and us girls, we played in the meadows, in the grass. It was just great. By one time, we played hide and seek, and our safe place was a stump of wood where the farmer would cut the wood, or with an axe. And the farmer left the axe on the floor. And I was standing there looking around. I was safe. And then another little girl came, and she was safe. She picked the axe up, and she cut my finger. She almost cut my hand off if she would have been a little stronger, but she cut my finger, my 2 fingers. Oh. And I was miserable after that, because to me that was so ugly. I thought my hand was so ugly, I will never get married in my life. Nobody will ever like me with this finger. But, I was okay. I had, one time I had pneumonia, and our hospital was like 10 kilometers away from our village. So the American truck from the army came and to pick me up, my mother and me up, and took me to the hospital. I was screaming my head off, and they would give me chocolates, they would give me chewing gum. I was 3.5 years older, or maybe 4, I was a little older, I couldn't eat anything. It was so funny. But we went to the hospital, and the hospital was still, everything was wartime. The hospital had one big room, and all the sick people from that day or from that week or whatever were in that one room. And my mother had to sleep with me on a bed. And I was burning up from fever. She told me that she couldn't even touch me because I was so burning up. I don't think they had penicillin. It was just awful. But I survived. This was pretty much my youth. We went to school in the next village, and we had one room for all the classes. There were so many kids, and I have no idea if I ever learned anything there. At least I was small. I was in the 1st grade or 2nd grade. I used to walk with my mother, and all my mother did was cry, because my father, she didn't know where my father was. He was still in the war. And all she did was cry, and I always said, oh my God, I wish she would stop crying. I wish she would stop crying. So that wasn't very sad. But otherwise, and then we also finally we found all our relatives, my aunts and my uncles, and they all came to visit, and somehow they all slept in this room. I have no idea how they did that.
Well, do you have any stories that you can share of your experience with how the war affected you and your family? Like, did you see the effects of that?
I just know my mother was very sad all the time. They always wanted to go back home. My father too always wanted to go back home, but we couldn't go home. There was all closed up there. I went home later, much later, when I was older. I went there to visit, but before that, no. Just never could go home.
Do you have any stories that you can remember from your father serving in the war? Did he tell you things that happened?
Okay, my father started sending letters home, and my mother, they were communicating with letters. And one time he was saying in the letter, I wish that war was over. Here come the Americans again in their planes, and we have to run into the woods and hide. I remember he told that story. And then when he was finally home, he was trying to take care of us, but he would go in the woods and cut old wood, so we could at least have some warmth in the house, because we had an old stove and wood-burning stove. And my mother, I always wanted to go with him. I loved my father. I always wanted to go with him. So I remember one time we went into the woods, and he was cutting old rotten trees down, no nice ones. And a farmer came, and the farmer said, you have to unload everything from that little wagon that he had. And my father just looked at him and said, you come here one step closer and I kill you. He was so mad. He says, you stayed home. You never went to war. I fought for this Germany that time, you know, and you come and you tell me I can't even take a broken down trees, you know. So he was furious. I think that's the only time I saw my father really, really mad, because he went right back to the war. He never told us any war stories. Yeah. He never told us any, only, you know, most of the time good things and funny things. He was very funny. He was a very funny man. But I feel like I'm so boring now.
No, you're not boring. It's very interesting. Do you remember any of the funny stories you might have shared?
He sent me a doll from France. When he was in France, he sent me a doll, and I still have that doll. And my brother got some building blocks. he sent him building blocks. And that's the only thing the poor kids there had to play with. Everybody came and played with those building blocks. It was so cute. But the kids were always busy. We were always busy. I remember one time I was walking with the girls, and we were pretending that the war was still going on, and a plane came, and we all jumped into the ditch and made believe that we were getting bombed. And one time, I have to tell that story, the Americans always came, the soldiers, the army always came to our villages on tanks and their trucks and their jeeps, and they would. It's a whole parade going down the street. And one time the kids, the boys from the village, they all got together and they were throwing rocks at them. They were, so the soldiers, they stopped and they tried to scare them, and they all ran away, and everybody ran away. And my cousin, who was the smallest from them, he was still standing there, and he was in very broken German. He says, "Ich nix gewesen bin." I didn't do that. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. He was scared to death. But they always threw chocolates from, the kids would usually call chocolate, chewing gum, and they would always throw chewing gums and chocolates at the kids, That was nice.
And they repaid them with rocks.
And yeah, I have no idea why they started throwing rocks. Maybe they didn't throw anything down that time, that particular time.
Oh, they were complaining because they didn't get chocolate.
Maybe they did. Probably. Oh my God.
Do you recall, like, what did your dad think of the war? Was he kind of like forced to fight, or was he already in the military?
He actually got into prison. He actually went to prison. I remember that now. He was in France, in Marseille, and there was the American prison, and he got caught. And something else before that, that's another story I always told, that all of a sudden everybody had to go to Russia. They had all these trucks going to Russia and taking the German soldiers to Russia. That was pretty much towards the end of the war. Mm-hmm. And he missed the truck. Mm. And we always said, probably on purpose, he did not want to go to Russia.
No, yeah.
My uncle, my aunt's husband, my uncle went to Russia, he never came back. But my father got caught by the Americans in France, and he went to American prison, and he loved it. He said it was the first time during all those years in the war that he had enough food. And he enjoyed it, and he was able to do he was always working with wood and trying to make something with wood. So he had a good time there.
So was he initially like angry towards the Americans, or was it just he had to fight because he was German?
He had to fight because he was German. They couldn't, they couldn't do anything.
Yeah, they like drafted him basically.
If in Germany, if you didn't go to war, even the young kids, my uncle was so young, he was like 16, 17, they all, towards the end, they drafted him too. It was terrible. And if you didn't go, you got shot. Mm. It was, even by us, even at home, when my brother and I were home, my mother always worked on the farm with the farm woman, so she got a little bit of food. What she would do is to get food for us, is she would go and pick potatoes in the fields. When they were done picking the potatoes, there were always some left. And she would go and she would pick those. And then when they were doing the harvest for the wheat, the wheat cutting. When they were done with that, and they had everything cleared off from the fields, my mother would go and would still find a lot of wheat on the ground, so she would pick those, and everybody did that. All the people that were so poor, that had come there, and then they would go to a mill and they would make flour. You have flour to bake something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My mother didn't. The grown-ups did not have a good time. It's just as kids, we were not suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm sure that your mom sacrificed and worked as hard as she could to make sure that you guys had food and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, she worked very hard.
You were still pretty young during the war. How was your life progressing after your dad came back? How was school then? Where did you move from there?
Well, my father came back, but he was never home. He had to work he went to work for a Munich company, Moll, M-O-L-L, Moll company. They would fix up the streets that were all bombed out, and the dams that were all bombed, and riverbeds that needed to be fixed. He was always gone, always. Only came home like sometimes every 6 weeks or every 5 weeks. He was never home. So my mother was always by herself and we were by ourselves. And then finally my uncle, they got an apartment for us. So we finally, after, it was I think 10 years, after 10 years living in that one room, we were able to move to another town, another village, but it was much bigger than the village we came from. But my scariest moment was when I as a 14-year-old girl who never left that little village only to go to school, I had to take my grandfather on a train and actually had to switch trains on the way there. That was the scariest moment for me. I was scared to death, but we made it. So I was then, after that, I was very proud that I took my grandfather there. But we always walked. In the winter, it was snow and everything, but we walked. Yeah, we always walked. And I was always cold. That's all I remember too. I was always freezing. My feet were cold, my hands were cold. Well, I'm still cold nowadays. And yeah, I went to high school. From there I went to a doctor's assistant school and became a doctor's assistant. And then I met my husband and I finally got out of Germany. I always wanted to come to America. My aunt got to America before anybody. She was the first one to go to America. She went with the doctor. She was the helper in the house. And she went to America. And then she sent us packages. And she always sent me dresses. So I just wanted to go to America. To me, that is a rich land and gonna have. And I met my husband in Germany, who was an American soldier in the army in America and was stationed in Germany. That's where I met him. And we came over here in 1963. 1961 we got married in Germany. 1963 we came over here. And we went to visit my aunt. My husband got stationed in Georgia. Yeah, Columbus, Georgia. He was stationed there, and I went I went to work in the hospital there. I did blood. I collected blood from the laboratory.
So how did it feel finally coming to America? Was it what you thought it would be?
We never really had the money that I thought we were going to have when we come to America. But it was much better, you know. At least we got a job. I got a job, and I made a little bit of money, and I had my experiences in that hospital. Oh my God! And when finally I quit the army, we got out of the army, we went back to New York, and that's when we went to Richmond Hill. You know, it's so weird. I forgot so many things. My youth, I remember, and now if I think back, I couldn't even tell you the years or the times.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I do the same thing.
So weird.
And you have more to remember than me, so.
Yeah, it's so weird. I don't remember anything. We had, then I finally got pregnant. I always wanted to have children. And it had to be a boy first and then a girl. And it was a boy first and then a girl. It was so funny. Germany was, the way I grew up, the boy was always everything in the family. The girls didn't count that much. I remember going, he would get skis, he would get ice skates, and then I had to always borrow everything. He got a bike, I had to borrow the bike to go any place. If I wanted to go ice skating, I had to borrow the ice skates. Yeah, the boy. And that's why I wanted a boy. And he was supposed to be really smart, and oh my God. No, he was funny. It took him, you know, he was a little older than my daughter, and he was just not interested in anything, you know. I said, Andrea, show him how to put the shoes on. And she would put the shoes in front of him, and he says, now you slip into them. He could not figure out which shoe goes where.
So it was your younger daughter who was helping her older brother?
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I feel like that's almost a little bit typical, because it tends to be that boys mature a little more slowly than the girls. You know, the girls, they're pretty sharp with it when they're little, you know.
She knew exactly what to do. And then they grew up, and I got old, and now I'm old.
Did you have any interesting stories to share when you were working in the hospital? It sounded like you might have had some stories there. One
time I went into a room, and the lady was laying in bed. And I said, Mrs. Donahue, I have to get some blood from you. But she wouldn't move, and she was just laying there. And I kept saying, Mrs. Donahue, and I touched her. I said, I have to. The lady behind the curtain comes around, and she says, Miss, don't you know she is dead? She had just died, and it was early in the morning. They hadn't done anything yet with her.
Oh my goodness.
They hadn't covered her completely. That I never forget. And one time I had to stick a little boy, a little baby, and you would take the blood from their heels. And I went and I took the heel and I stuck the baby, and he started to cry, and really hard. And the nurse comes around. She says, "Oh my God, you brought him back to life." I don't know what she meant. Did she mean he finally woke up, or did they think he was dead? I have no idea.
Oh my goodness.
All this. One time I had to go into a room where the boy was in a fire, and he got so burnt, and you couldn't take blood from any place from him, only from the toe. I had to take blood from the toe. So there was some experiences. I couldn't do it anymore because you have to have some kind of license here to practice all this and to do all this. But I only had a doctor's assistant from Germany, you know, and that nothing from Germany really counted, whatever you did in Germany. In the meantime, I had gotten married again. I got divorced from my first husband and got married again.
Anything that you can share, you know, from your experience going through the divorce, maybe some advice for the people who are listening?
I had to do everything on my own. I never had anybody that would help me or listen to me, or, you know, when I was complaining. I had an aunt here and 2 cousins, but, you know, I always had to do everything on my own. That sometimes I cannot get over it. I say, oh my God, I did everything on my own, you know.
Yeah. So are you saying that that's part of the reason why that first marriage didn't work out, because your husband didn't support you enough there?
My first marriage didn't work out because my husband was very, very overly, I don't know, jealous, or what do you say? Possessive. I wanted to better myself. I went to college. I went to take some courses at night. So I told him, I said, I have to go to college on this particular night, or maybe twice a week. And he just couldn't. Every time I came home, he would ask, where were you? Why were you out so late? What, are you going again? And it was just so hard. Everything was very hard for me. And then, one time, and I always said to myself, maybe it's my fault that we can't get along. And then one time at night I was picking up my daughter from school, and they had a blood drive. So I said, you know, I always wanted to give blood whenever there was a blood drive. And so I stayed in the school and I gave blood, and then I went home with Andrea. And when I came home, he was like a wild man that I came home so late. And when I tell him I gave blood, didn't matter. You didn't cook for me. And he would take all the stuff out of the refrigerator and put it on the counter, and then he would take his arm and he would throw everything down on the floor, mustard and ketchup and everything just all over the floor. It was terrible. I couldn't live with him anymore.
Yeah. So then, what did you learn from that, and you know, how did that help you in your second marriage? Did that help you?
Oh, yeah. I married a younger man, 8 years younger than me. I met my second husband. He was a policeman, and I was 40, and he was 34. So he was like 6 years younger than me. And yeah, we got along great. We didn't get married. We were together like 30 years. We finally got married, and then he died. You know, my first husband actually died after we got divorced. He passed away too. So it doesn't matter if they're older or younger. They still die earlier than me. Oh my God. So that was pretty much my life.
I think you've given us a pretty good few stories. Do you think that you could leave us with one little nugget of wisdom?
Don't get old. Everything happens when you're old. No, it's good to be old. I love it here. I enjoy it here. If you're nice to people, and if you're honest with people and nice, honesty is a word that is not so easy. So You know, there are things that people always want to hide, but nice, be nice, treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Yeah, that's very important.
All right, that sounds like some good wisdom.
Yeah.
Just want to say thank you very much.